All right, gentlemen, we are live. Frank Holmes, Aydin Kilic, thanks for joining me on the Mining Pod. How we doing, y'all?
Great to be here.
Outstanding.
Yeah, big news. I appreciate y'all coming on kind of last minute. We saw the acquisition news come out of Hive, signing an LOI with Bitfarms to buy a 200 megawatt site in Yguazú, Paraguay. Going to get the press release up here just for people who are not up to speed. This acquisition would add 200 megawatts of capacity, and it is part of Hive's roadmap to roll out 25 exahashes by September 2025. So, with that laying the groundwork and setting the stage for this, would love y'all's thoughts on when did negotiations start for this and what Hive sees in this acquisition specifically.
This acquisition started in the fall of last year of sort of this strategy and discussion, and the strategy for Bitfarms was to focus on this major acquisition. If we go back in that history, Riot was after Bitfarms. Bitfarms was in a proxy battle with Riot. They found a standstill, and they went and did this transaction in the interim to go into the U.S. With a serious acquisition. There was, I think, immediate 4 exahash, but in front of them was a gig of electricity, and management wanted to focus more on the U.S. at that stage, and now they had, big cash calls for building out Paraguay. We were interested in expanding our footprint in Paraguay. Other deals for fresh 100 megawatts were coming to us, and all of a sudden they wanted to say, well, look, we'd rather focus U.S. That's their strategy. We want to focus and be green, and Paraguay is the place to go. And so that's when we said, well, what about we buy your assets and we can fast track, and we finish the project. And what with the back and forth. So who's been really key in this whole thing has been Aydin, of back and forth with Ben, but this started just back when Ben ended up becoming the CEO.
Yeah, so Ben and I have a good rapport. We've been on panels together, and we're both very technical CEOs. So, he had a vision to pursue the Stronghold site in the US. And for Hive, it's always been about green energy, and hydros are our favorite, if you can say that. And also the capex on $1 per megawatt basis, because we have this ROIC model, right, is also very attractive about the site in Paraguay. And we earmarked that in our press release is $400,000 a megawatt for a site that was, materially complete. So it had all the right aspects. It was a very, symbiotic deal. I think that it really helps both of our companies get to where we need to be. We focus always on having the best unit economics, right? Really good uptime, and I think that's been covered broadly in this sector by many analysts such as Anthony Powers. But also, we have the lowest G&A per Bitcoin mined. So high horsepower, low burn rate, right? So pound for pound, we strive to be the best. We've done that year over year in, year out, bear market, bull market. However, the street has often suggested that we needed more scale. And, we're very disciplined and cautious, because in 2028, we saw miners go bankrupt. 2022, we saw miners go bankrupt after the whole Celsius and FTX fallouts. And that wasn't that long ago, right? That was a pretty grisly bear market. And then guess what? 2023 was another year of the bear market. So we navigated that mining with positive gross mining margins quarter over quarter. In our slide deck, I think we just ran out of room. We had like 13 quarters in a row of positive gross mining margin. And before that was the bull market. So it was super, super lucrative. And so, it just seemed that the street was so obsessed with scale, and they go, okay, well, Iris is going to go to 30 exahash, and Mara and CleanSpark are all 30 exahash. And so we wanted to find the right and what we felt was the best opportunity. And so that's obviously been twofold: our own site, 100 megawatts in Paraguay, and now the Bitfarms site. So collectively, that puts us at 300 megawatts in Paraguay. I believe that makes us the largest market participant in the country. And also, it's worth noting, last week we announced the appointment of General John Evans, a retired 3-star Army general from the U.S., and he's part of our Global Strategic Advisory Committee. And so it allows us to have discussions at a high level. Frank has met President Peña in Paraguay. And by the way, Paraguay is a very U.S.-aligned country. Peña was invited to Trump's inauguration, right? Brazil was not. So Mexico was not. So anyways, there's sort of more than meets the eye. But at the same time, the core values, green energy, low capex, great potential for ROI. And I think I mentioned to you a little bit earlier in our preamble, the ASICs that we secured for our Paraguay expansion, we got at $14 a terahash, right? Which at $55 hash price is about 10-month ROI after modeling OPEX. And so we're personally very excited. It's 400% growth from where we stand today. I believe the market analysts that I've spoken to have suggested we've got the most growth of everybody in the industry for calendar 2025. So we're going in with a bang. I think the timing couldn't be better with the Trump administration, which we're obviously huge fans of. So it's a good time to be a Hive shareholder, I think.
Really appreciate that perspective and just like laying the groundwork for this. A few data points from the actual acquisition, because you mentioned 400K a megawatt, Aydin, pretty attractive. 25 million payable at closing, scheduled for Q1 this year, and 31 million payable in equal installments over 6 months following closing. That's from y'all's press release on the acquisition. I want to touch on something that you just said, Aydin, about this being kind of a symbiotic deal. I mean, with this, Hive is leaning into Paraguay as an operating jurisdiction, while Bitfarms is leaning out. Now, I've heard arguments that some financiers in the U.S. do not want to issue capital to companies that have power assets or infrastructure outside of the U.S., that leaning into that makes it more difficult for miners to access capital markets. I'm curious if that informed Bitfarms' move here, or what y'all think about that, because I think there's two arguments that could be made. Like leaning into the U.S. for Bitfarms might be because of that, but Hive also seems to be making a statement here that hash rate is hash rate, and cheap energy is all that matters in this race. So
two quick things. I'll let Frank take it. First of all, we have 100 million left on our ATM, another 100 million on our base shelf, and 300 million plus of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So we have access to capital at a very low cost, first of all. And Frank's been in capital markets for 40 years. So I'll let him address the rest, because if Frank's not concerned, I'm not concerned. Let's just say that.
I think the big part is that when we explored the opportunity of going to Paraguay, I went through it methodically and went through and found out that he's a member of the Young Presidents Organization, which I've been involved with since like 92. That's CEOs around the world. There's about 35,000 members out of 8 billion, but they control 10% of the world's GDP. So he's part of this group, and so is Aydin, is a YPO member, and one of our directors is a YPO member, Dave Perel. One of our two of our officers running Sweden is a YPOer, and Bermuda, that runs the treasury functions, also YPO. So I go through a list and find out right away he's a YPOer, and I reach out to set up a meeting for that, and so I go down to meet the president of the country, and Gabe, our general counsel, and Luke, our chief operating officer. They join me on that first trip, and we go in and meet them, and it's functioning at that level. And he studied at the University of Columbia in New York City. He worked for the World Bank. He has a global perspective, but most important was they love America. Very different than Colombia. There's only 3 presidents that I'm aware of that got invited to Trump's inauguration, and that was El Salvador, that was Argentina, because they have a new great leader, economist, and Austrian economics mindset. And then there was Santiago Peña. He was invited to the inauguration. And so I go on that trip, and I'm giving you short and long term. So last May, June, going there, and you find out that it was President Hayes in 1870 that stopped the annihilation of all the men and boys in that country from Uruguay and Brazil trying to take it over. And one of the biggest states in the country is the state, not of Texas, like in America, but it is Hayes. So they love America. We went out in the country, and what do we see? These little flags of Taiwan. It's associated with Taiwan. It's not mainland China. It's associated with pro-Israel. And it's very different than the other left-wing leaders in South America. And so to me, it was this oasis. They have all this energy. It's the largest dam in the Western Hemisphere. It is something like 5 kilometers long.
You're talking about the Itaipu Dam?
Yeah, it's a marvel.
It's unbelievable. So in our recent trip, we went to visit there, and we did another political trip. We went out and met the leaders of the head of the opposition party. So the House leader for the Democrats and for Republicans. We went to see them back in December. Aydin and I did. And they're pro-Bitcoin, and they're pro-Bitcoin mining, which was really interesting. And then we went to see the governor of the state of where we are building our existing facility. So we've covered the politics. It's really important to grasp. So we didn't feel unsafe. What was disappointing was in that journey from signing a deal that we didn't really announce because we're trying to buy the property, the real estate. We had a verbal that we had the energy, which is important, but we didn't own the land. If you go and stay in any of these countries, yes, I've got it in this county, I've got this, but I don't have the land. All of a sudden, people front run you, and the land prices go from $2,000 an acre to $200,000 an acre. And so you have to be really thoughtful about how you're doing this. During that period, they raised Bitcoin mining a tariff on it, which really upset a lot of people. And a lot of people we found had old machines, so they became unprofitable. But they were very profitable at 4.7 cents all in for us. So we said, this is very annoying and frustrating. We want to expand. And we said we had other opportunities. We're not going to do anything until we build our own and get our teeth in there. But along came the Bitfarms opportunity. Well, that Bitfarms opportunity started coming in after American Thanksgiving, going into especially Christmas. Aydin and I quickly flew to Paraguay and met other politicians, went to see the dam, went to visit other major assets, get a lot of intelligence that's really important that's there. And we met, like I said, the governor. So we really think we have a good feel for it. But we also know, as the biggest player, we're helping the country. If they have so much surplus electricity, they try to sell it to Argentina and other places. They don't get paid, or it's no pay or slow pay. It hurts their economy, their budgeting. Brazil basically is 50-50 with Brazil. If they don't use the energy, then Brazil keeps it. So what's the best thing? It comes along. We build a substation. They don't have the money for the substation. We're building that. We're bringing in the transformers. We're helping to electrify the country, but they get US dollars every month. They don't get Argentina until they got a new leader and not paying them for 3 years. And so it helps. It's a stability agreement for the country to manage its fiscal policies. So I think it's a win-win. But for us, it was really frustrating. It really was for the shareholders and for us. We couldn't find size of green energy after Putin invaded Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Immediately, energy around the world, unrelated to Ukraine's crisis, went up a penny, and some places 3 pennies. And we saw the price volatility in the New England, beside where we are in New Brunswick and Maine. All of a sudden, it becomes volatile. It has nothing to do with Putin and Ukraine. but the emotional fear element showed up in the energy prices. Canada comes out and says, no more projects allowed for data centers, not just Bitcoin, anything, because we have to protect our source of energy now. And so we said, well, we can't go and get, and we looked at these projects, 30 megawatts were just as expensive as 100 megawatts in Quebec. And you don't own the land, you don't own the asset. Same thing in Sweden. They put a tax on the energy, a huge tax. But fortunately, we hedge for less than 2 pennies. And after the tax, it still blends itself out. But it was really interesting to see this fear element around the world. Paraguay is a completely different. It's removed from, it's isolated. So that became our opportunity to get size of green energy only.
So going back to that, Pena being kind of chummy with Trump, there being good relations with both countries seems to be kind of a talking point to make sure that investors and other market participants are comfortable with this. I think a lot of Americans look at some regions in South America and they think of instability. I think a lot of that within the Bitcoin mining industry is because they're looking at kind of analogs like Venezuela, which is a much more politically unstable country, right? Going back to the tariff, though, I think that did come as a shock to a lot of Bitcoin miners, specifically because of what you just said, to where this is a win-win for the Bitcoin miners and for Andy, because they are actually making more money on this electricity than they otherwise would, just piping it to Brazil, right? Is there any fear that there could be other unforeseen tariffs or taxes or rate hikes on this energy? Like how, I understand the appeal to the political stability of the country, but is there still a consideration that maybe something like that might happen again in the future?
In conversations that Aydin's had and separate conversations I've had, it's not so. The backlash has been too great against the country, and it comes up for renegotiating in 27, beginning of 27, and the thoughts are that it goes back to 2.5 cents, 3 cents. That's the thought process. They had some mismanagement of their government utility that was evident, and so they felt that they could turn around and use Bitcoin miners. Well, what they realized, and this happened in Canada too to us, and where we are in Sweden, they get these bombardments of people calling in. We want 100 megawatts. We want 500 megawatts. So the planning person is not used to that. It's like 1 megawatt, 5 megawatts, not 50 megawatts, not 200 megawatts. And so they start adding up. They say, well, we don't have the infrastructure to deliver all of that. And you start finding out it's predominantly Chinese companies. Mm-hmm. And so the wake up call there is that all the interest there was predominantly mainland Chinese companies.
They move fast and break things usually, right? Like there's a kind of,
the thing is, it's
I don't want to get y'all in trouble or anything, but I do think that there is a perception in the industry that there are certain miners who really move fast and maybe like play loose with the rules, right? And then kind of the more buttoned up miners end up suffering.
Like Chinese miners, and we were able to visit numerous sites. I can't say who, but I'll just say in the same sentence, we visited numerous sites when we were in Paraguay, and I will also say that we've seen Chinese operated Bitcoin mines which produce hash rate, but I've not so much seen Chinese operated Bitcoin mines investing in the community, having dialogue and diplomacy with the government officials at the municipal, provincial or state level and federal. And that's how we do business at Hive. So we are very, I think, comfortable, and I would say very experienced in dealing with, regulatory uncertainty. I mean, we've navigated tax issues in Sweden successfully. Every jurisdiction, Quebec at one point, there was a moratorium, and Quebec is still some of our cheapest power. So I think it's how you engage. You've got to talk to the regulators, talk to the tax folks, etc. And I think what Frank is alluding to is when you have these kind of what I call knee-jerk responses, where utility companies or local jurisdictions get overwhelmed by the sudden influx for power, they're just like, whoa, we gotta suppress this, and how do we just tell these guys to go away? Okay, guess what? The price is higher for you guys, right? But the long-standing participants that participate in demand response as we do in Sweden. And by the way, we've pioneered demand response in the province of New Brunswick. We're the only ones doing it, right? We take these initiatives and leaps and bounds to show how Bitcoin miners can be strong participants and welcome participants in any jurisdiction. And so we're confident that with our international expertise in the various jurisdictions that we operate, that we'll really be able to set a strong pace and shine by example in Paraguay. And moreover, as Frank alluded to, we're confident that we think as they see that we would be a great business partner, that rate coming down. And by the way, the other component of that knee-jerk reaction is there were some bad actors and there was power being siphoned off in Paraguay for sort of clandestine Bitcoin mining. You've probably heard of that. And so I think that part of it was that, and they've cleaned that up. And so when they have a NASDAQ listed company that is paying them in US dollars on time every month, with a plan to grow, hire locally, invest in the community, like we flew that down there. And in addition to the technical diligence, a big part of it was understanding the wants and needs of the local community, right? So what does that mean? Well, in this particular case, the governor of the region where our facility is in needed electricity distributed to local schools in more rural areas. That was their want and need. Well, we were happy to oblige because, I mean, first of all, we're in the electricity business, so it's very much in our wheelhouse to be able to deliver on that. And so we invest in the local community by sponsoring the hockey team, and the arena is named after us. We also invest in the sports teams in New Brunswick. So it's a way of doing business. It's our ethos. And, even in Quebec, and we used to talk about this a lot, but it's definitely worth mentioning, we do heat recycling. A lot of guys talked about it, like, oh, hey, you can reuse heat in Bitcoin mining. We've been doing it in Quebec for years. For years, we capture the heat from our 30 megawatt facility in Lachute, and it heats a 200,000 square foot factory that produces swimming pools of all things. And, Quebec in the winter is very cold. So we're very mindful and thoughtful of how we approach Bitcoin mining. We're the largest demand response participant in the country of Sweden. So I think this pedigree and track record going into a jurisdiction like Paraguay, understanding the political landscape, understanding their wants and needs, we're really confident. And frankly, I'm super excited about 2025 and plan to be spending a lot more time in Paraguay.
So speaking of the current year, I want to refocus back on the acquisition and talk about the timeline with this. So it seems like the rollout's going to be done in 2 phases. Mm-hmm. Roughly, what's the completion date for both of those phases?
What we put in the press release was April 1st energization for the first 100 megawatts and Q3 for the second 100 megawatts. So just to give you a bit more color, we wanted to be conservative. We believe that the construction will be complete sometime in March, and the energization date with on-days April 1st. So it's possible that we move that up, but let's just say April 1st. And then, you'd roll in ASICs in the month of April and May. And so we bring that 6 exahash of air-cooled up, and that really just falls in calendar Q2. And then the second 100 megawatts will be hydro. And so we would roll that out because a 200 megawatt substation is completed and built. It's actually 240 MVA, 240 megawatt usable. 240 MVA, 200 megawatt usable. And so that will roll out those hydro containers over the course of the summer. And so we're anticipating really a July, August deployment for that 6.5 exahash of hydro containers. And that's really how it's going to roll out. And by the way, when we did our landmark purchase in December of the Bitmain S21 Plus Hydro, we purchased 8.5 exahash and we broadcast a target of 15 exahash. Now, that's important for one reason. We bought surplus hydros. Why? Because we knew we were going to expand beyond the 100 megawatts in Paraguay. We couldn't say it. And so, if you kind of zoom in one level further, our guidance before is like, okay, we're going to be at 13 exahash. We'll be at 13 exahash with our existing sites of 130 megawatts and our 100 megawatts in Paraguay, 13 exahash. We bought 2 exahash of extra hydros for our imminent expansions in Paraguay. So we actually have the 2 exahash of the for the Bitfarms site already earmarked as part of our existing order. And so we're going to effectively upsize that order. And so that's the rollout. That's the logistics. We've got a clear ASIC procurement plan. And, so far, we've ordered ASICs from Bitmain and Canaan, and they've both been great to work with. So, and by the way, people have been speculating on hash rate growth. Difficulty actually dropped on Monday. It went down from 110 to 108. So, I mean, look, we've seen hash price go as low as $38 post-halving, but I think that hash rate doesn't just, magically grow. There's all that infrastructure behind it. So, we could look at a 25% hash rate growth, which I think is an aggressive projection. I don't think it'll be that much over the next 6 months. And even if we did, we'd still be doing, we'd still be 3% of the network. We'd still be doing about $500 million of annual revenue and about $250 million of cash flow, even if Bitcoin stays at 100 grand and hash rate grows by 25% in the next 6 months. Why 25% in the next 6 months? It grew 25% in the previous 6 months. So, we're really confident now. If we want to talk about our position in the market and where our enterprise value is, I think it's a great time to be a Hive shareholder, because with this growth in cash flow and production, we expect that it would be a re-rating in a very favorable direction for Hive.
Did I hear correctly that you said that the second phase of the acquisition will be furnished with hydro specifically?
Correct. Yep.
And
yep.
The first phase will be air cool and eventually hydro, or
what's no. So the project the acquisition, $56 million, comprises the land, 10 buildings, which will constitute air cooled with evaporative chilling, and of course the substation, right? The completed 240 MVA substation. And so we'll be populating those buildings with air cooled machines. Okay. And the second 100 megawatts on the remaining land will be hydro containers.
That makes sense.
And part of our diligence as I said, we visited numerous sites in Paraguay. We've seen the hydro containers in action, and we are quite pleased with how they perform and their uptime, etc. So we felt that the hydro technology is now mature. When it came out a few years ago, it was almost like a science experiment, right? Like the S9 hydro. The hydro always came out at the very end of an ASIC life cycle. Right. It was like super expensive, and it was almost like esoteric. Like, why would you buy it? Now, as jurisdictions have broadened, and there's a lot of crypto mining in like Ethiopia and UAE, and of course Latin America, having these climate controlled, I guess climate control is a good way to put it, fully contained ASIC mining solutions makes sense for those jurisdictions. That or immersion, of course, right?
Is there a consideration for like why? So just to kind of dig into this a little bit more, why hydro specifically? Just for the gains in hash rate? Because Paraguay doesn't get that hot in the summer. Is humidity a factor here?
It's hot and humid.
Okay.
It's like Houston. Even their winter is hotter than Houston.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm just looking. I guess yeah. Sorry, they're on the they're in the other hemisphere. So in January, it can get up to 100 degrees according to this Google search result that I have. So that makes total sense.
The other piece is if you look at the Bitmain S21 Plus, the air cooled version does 16.5 joules a terahash, and the hydro version is 15 joules a terahash, right? So that's a 10% improvement in operating efficiency, plus the environmental considerations that Frank has shared, plus $1 per terahash price was incredibly attractive. And on $1 per megawatt, Bitmain's got a nice self-contained cooling tower solution that comes with the hydro system, right? And it's again, they've mass produced this stuff. Their intention, and they've demonstrated, is to have the containers and all that cooling infrastructure sort of be fixed, and the new iterations of the ASICs you can just sort of re into the existing infrastructure, right? So I think they've done a good job. They have a great video on their website of the facility in Ethiopia running this technology.
So going back again to the phase by phase build out, how does the handoff here work? Is Bitfarms going to complete the first phase? Is Hive going to take control of the first phase? Are y'all going to take control of the second phase?
A great question. The same contractor that is building our facility was building theirs.
Okay.
Seamless.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess my question then would still be, it's like, is there in the LOI, is it like Bitfarms is just going to finish the phase one and then y'all will take over the contractor's contract?
So we have a closing date, and in our press release, we've just provided the range that the closing will occur in Q1 of this year. So ahead of the April 1st energization, it'll be in Q1, calendar Q1. And so I'm going to be going down to we're going to be going down to Paraguay in about a month. And so that will sort of culminate with what we expect the material completion of the site. And in around then, and I don't want to specify the exact date, but the closing. And so upon closing, we'll own the site, and we'll be installing our gear, and if there's any fine tuning, et cetera, we may do that. But the site's effectively material. But there's a closing date.
Okay, got it. I want to dig into PPA really quickly. And I know that there's probably a lot that y'all can't say about this, but I have to ask the question. In one of their either press releases or in an investor presentation, Bitfarms, speaking of the Yguazú site, said this sustainable hydro from the dam will be provided at a contractual low cost of approximately 3.9 cents per kilowatt hour before value-added tax, with the added benefit of not being subject to annual inflationary adjustments. Is this a good ballpark? Will Hive be inheriting that PPA, I assume?
Yep.
So that's essentially the rate that will be baked into this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how does that compare to the Itaipu EPA? I mean, PPA, excuse me.
The Itaipu is, a large dam that generates 10. We're in the central control room. It generates 10.4 gigawatts. So it feeds a lot of the region. So I think that really, when you're signing a deal with Ande, the rate that you just cited is broadly the industrial rate. So that's, without getting into the details, that's sort of the best takeaway. That's the best way to think of it.
Yeah. So leads into my next question, because there is the Yguazú dam, right? And there's the Itaipu dam. I mean, will this site Hive is acquiring be sharing power from both? Will it be largely coming from one over the other? How is the power divided in that region?
There's a substation, a large substation that is regional in the vicinity of our site. And there's a large substation that's regional in the vicinity of the site we're acquiring from Bitfarms. And these are massive. I've got a great photo I could perhaps share with you that we took from the helicopter, because we flew by helicopter to both sites because we had so many meetings.
But that was fun. Probably an incredible view.
It was like living on it. Never mind watching TV, we're living it.
All right.
Better than make a show called Cryptos. Anyways, and so you see this massive regional substation. So it's those substations that handle the distribution for that region. And but we have our own substations on each of our site, right? And so it's the distribution that you're pulling from that substation is what really feeds you.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just curious about the weighting of where miners are in the region, because it seems like the Itaipu Dam is the one that always gets flaunted, and it seems like the majority of the miners are connected to hubs that draw from that hydro plant. Just wondering how many are in Yguazú, and if that has any bearing on actual electricity rates, if one is overweighted versus the other, and if that affects how much your
it's not so much. It's not so much that. I think it's more just based on the contract that you sign, and perhaps I'll reiterate, the rate that you cited is consistent.
Okay.
For miners in this day and age.
Yeah, that's pretty attractive. Obviously, when you look at, some of the other rates in the North American sector, right? I mean, even Texas now, it's like hard to find anything that's super
Exactly. And by the way, I'll add this. I think that some miners, and we've looked at this very closely, we did formal diligence on a site in the US that was behind the meter solar, but then you're getting into power generation. If you're spending $1.5 million a megawatt on the generation side of things to get power down to 2.5 cents versus, and then you've got your facility build out on top, another 400 or 500 G's a megawatt, whatever. If you're into it for almost 2 million a megawatt capex to build to get quote unquote 2.5 cents, or you're all in at 400 grand a megawatt to build at 4 cents, you got to look at the capex piece, right? And we've run the math. Like if your delta is like 1.5 million a megawatt to get generation, that's like a 20-year payback before you even break even, right? So I think that's often swept under the rug. Like for example, like the whole flared gas mining thing, or nat gas, where you've got to lease gen sets, that is often left out of the equation, and people just say, hey, we're able to get gas at like whatever 1 cent. Yeah, but like to convert that gas to electricity, you need gen sets. So there's a massive upfront capex. Or like, oh, well, we'll just lease them. Well, then you amortize that, and it still brings you to like 3-4 cents anyways, right? So I think that it's important to note the dollar per megawatt. What are you paying in order to get that power cost, right? And as you said, right, it's still tough to find cheap power stateside.
One last question before we go into final thoughts. Really appreciate y'all's time here. Any updates on the other site that Hive is building in Paraguay? This was y'all's flagship.
Yeah, that's the other reason you're going down there in a month. It's coming along nicely. Civil work is completed. We have some key dates coming up in the spring, and we'll be tweeting cool photos from the helicopter, etc. But yeah, that's all on target. We previously announced it would be summer, that 100 megawatts would be lit up, and that 6.5 exahash of hydro miners is targeted really for May, June, and we're comfortable with those dates. Might be sooner, but we're comfortable saying May, June.
Fantastic. All right, Aydin, Frank, any final thoughts on this acquisition and 2025 and beyond for Hive?
I think that at the beginning, the smarter investors will see that over the next 9 months, this huge growth. And I think we'll go through that re-rating. And what is that re-rating? Rather than trading at 1 times pro forma revenue, they think the median is like 5 times. So if you go to 5 times, then we would be doing $2.5 billion valuation, not 400 million. I think that's roughly what we think. The smarter investors are. We're getting phone calls all day since it's been announced, and text. So we're just going to do the story like we're sharing with you. The shrewder, smarter investor will be going long.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I think to bookend that comment, I think one has to look at the track record and execution. Like, our facility in Lachute, 30 megawatts, was the largest crypto mine in Canada for a good era, right? That facility was built in 2016, right? So, and this was a little bit before my time, but under Frank's stewardship, Frank led that acquisition during the bear market. And then when I joined Hive in January 2021, that was to oversee the acquisition of New Brunswick, which was partially complete 30 megawatt site that we built out to 70. And then that became the largest single site mine in Canada. And so, everyone was sort of diluting, raising money like crazy and just scaling. But this was our moment. We were waiting to pounce and to do a really great acquisition. So I would say that this acquisition of Bitfarms, in addition to being symbiotic, very much is, in our lineage of finding great acquisitions to scale the business very creatively. Frank's got a great deal IQ. I love getting into the weeds and like, I love diligence. I just, spent about a decade doing property development. I started my career as an electrical engineer, so I like all of that stuff. I just eat, sleep, and breathe. And so we're really pumped about it. And we'll be at 430 megawatts, 25 exahash by September. That's the goal. That's the vision. Cracking 2 billion US of market cap. By the way, we have $300 million of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And by the way, I know this is more of a mining podcast, but we're doing $10 million of annualized revenue from our NVIDIA GPUs. And we just invested 30 million in InfiniBand H100s and H200s, right? So those will bring us to 20 million annualized revenue from our GPU AI business in the next quarter. So that often gets left out of the conversation, but that's just the cherry on top, right? So
last thing to share with you, compliment that. How many employees does it take to run a Bitcoin mining facility? Other people have hundreds. We run this with intellectual capital of 20 people.
SG&As are.
Our revenue is $6 million per employee. NVIDIA is 3.5. Apple is 2.5. So the savvy, when I talk to a money manager, another person that is, that's where I come from, it's really easy to resonate what we're doing. But the last thing to share with you is we did hire a strategic advisor, was retired general, 3-star general John Evans. Why John Evans is because power and energy is becoming a sovereign asset. It's very, very important. We experienced this in Sweden, we experienced this in Canada, and you see the whole idea is bringing everything back to the US. And so we think that securing energy like this is going to be very important. And what are the logistics? This is a guy that ran all of North America, right up to Canada, overlooking at missiles, 20 stations across Russia, pointing at the US to come over Canada. He ran all of that. So he knows about the cybersecurity and deployment. So we're thinking bigger. Where do we go to a gig of electricity and we're Bitcoin mining? We want to be contrarian. We're also hearing that in West Texas, 15 exahash is going to get replaced for HPC. What's going to happen to those machines? What's going to happen when that shutdown in the hashing network? So you are seeing these switches. Riot gets an investor that's come in to buy them 10% and wants them to focus more on HPC. We're having a real switch and change take place on these sources of energy that are very valuable, locking up this energy. So that's another reason what Aydin said about HPC in New Brunswick. We're going to repurpose 20 megawatts there. That's like 200 megawatts in Bitcoin mining. So we are just going along and really conscientious about our payback, and believe that we stay tuned to this station. It's the best value proposition.
Yeah, we definitely need to have y'all back on maybe for a HPC AI roundtable with the Bitcoin miners, because that's something that we've been tracking for the last year or so. And I think it's just like obviously a hot button topic, a lot of questions that people have, and a lot of misunderstanding about how a lot of this works, because there's so many different business models, right? But
there's so many different business models, and I'm just going to quickly note, we used to mine Ethereum, right? We built our own ASIC miner. We've navigated, like our site captain in Lachute, he's navigated 3 halving events, 2016, 2020, 2024. Our CTO Bill has navigated 4 halving events. Hive is the first public crypto miner. So we've had these different modalities. It's the agility mindset, right? Zap the Gap is, I think, from the Ken Blanchard, is a famous business book. And so we've really tried to have a high performance culture as a company, navigate. And so, we started generating revenue from our GPUs in HPC in early 2023, right? That's almost 2 years ago. We hit $1 million of annualized revenue with 400 GPUs. And we grew that to 4,000 GPUs. Now we're at $10 million of annualized revenue. And so it's constantly looking at, and by the way, like, I haven't, we'll talk about it on your HPC roundtable, but, we sponsor compute for researchers. Like NeurIPS was in Vancouver, Neural Information Processing Systems, 20,000 person AI conference, right? And, we were liaising with some professors doing deep research in AI, and we sponsor them with compute. So there's a lot happening at Hive, right? Really cool R&D initiatives. That's how we innovate, right? And so, again, we do that with our core team of, Frank likes to calls us the Navy SEALs. But it's awesome, right? We huddle over 9 time zones every day. And by the way, we're super thrilled about the Bitfarms deal. But 2025 is going to be a really great year. We're working on some other things too. So stay tuned. As Frank said, this is a good channel, and we'd be happy to join your other roundtable.
Yeah, keep us in the loop. Definitely want to know more about what 2025 and beyond will bring. Well, Frank, Aydin, Godspeed with the expansion. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you all have a good week. And
we will. It's just great news. We're so
we will have a great week. Thank you.
riding that acquisition high. Love to see it.
I got my buddy here. Stay bullish.
Good stuff. All right, Aydin, Frank, thanks so much. And to everyone tuning in, appreciate y'all. We'll see y'all next week.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.